Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ultimate Neo Geo review here on Player One Start. In the previous videos in this series, we took a look at the history and development behind this console, the tech specs, audio visuals, as well as the launch games, fighters, beat-em-ups, and shooters. In this video, we're going to have a mix and match of games including platformers, puzzle games, an RPG, and a few special bonus games. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Spinmaster is an arcade game that was developed and released by Data East in December of 1993 in North America. It came out in Europe the same year, but released in Japan the following February in 1994. In this game, you're on a quest to save your girlfriend, but also on a quest to stop an evil mad doctor who wants to buy up all the world's toys and candy, plunging the children of Earth into bitter darkness and well-balanced meals. No joke, that's actually what the manual says. You can team up with a second player who will take control of Tom, and you will both be armed with your trusty yo-yo. And I think this game is just indicative of how much of a resurgence yo-yos had in the mid-90s. You use them to hit enemies and treasure chests that can contain better weapons like throwing stars, icicle daggers, and even guided missiles. Upon its release, this game received a fairly decent reception, with gamers and critics being enthralled with the unique platformer, as the arcade was not often a place where you would find action platform games. Nevertheless, this game has received around a 7 or 8 out of 10, with more recent reviews cooling off to around a 6 out of 10. But overall, I actually had a lot of fun with this one. My only main criticism is that yes, because this was designed to be an arcade game, there are areas that were designed to take your quarters, and thus result in a lot of what I consider cheap deaths. But I didn't think it detracted from the gameplay too much. I would give this one a play if you can. Thankfully it's been re-released over the years, so you can find it cheaper than on the Neo Geo.
Oh! Ow! You are finished,
Top Hunter, Roddy and Cathy is a side-scrolling arcade platform game that was developed by SNK for the Neo Geo and was released in 1994. In addition to the MVS and AES release, it was also released on the Neo Geo CD. In this game, you play as the galaxy's top bounty hunters that are sent to put a stop to a colony of galactic pirates who threaten and plunder the cosmos. Player 1 takes control of Roddy, and Player 2 takes control of Cathy, and you must navigate through the stages collecting items, killing enemies, and killing a boss at the end of each area. You also get a set of special moves which can be performed by moving the joystick in certain directions and pressing the attack button. The game is split into 4 planets which you get to choose from when you first start playing. And depending on which planet you pick first, the stage layout will change. After completing all 4 planets, the player is taken to the final stage, where they must rematch with the 4 bosses of the game, and then move on to the game's final antagonist, Captain Clapton. This game received mixed to positive reception when it was released, with Electronic Gaming Monthly giving it an average of around 7 out of 10, with some of the reviewers criticizing that the difficulty, even on the hardest setting, was way too easy, leaving them to conclude that there just wasn't enough value there for the price of a Neo Geo cartridge. However, paradoxically, every single one of the reviewers said they enjoyed the game. And I would say the same myself. I really did enjoy the game, although if you were to collect it for the Neo Geo, the price again may not justify buying it for the Neo Geo. But I had a fun time with it, and I would definitely recommend giving it a playthrough if you can find it.
Congratulations!
Next up is Bang Bang Busters, though the game's title screen lists it as Bang Squared Busters. And this game is unique because it was developed in 1994, but never released for unknown reasons until 2010, when an independent developer and publisher, Neo Conception, released an international version of the AES ports as part of its acquisition deal with Visco. They have since released an MVS and Neo Geo CD version, as well as a Dreamcast version in 2018. In terms of gameplay though, Bang Bang Busters is a platform game similar to Snow Bros, where as Player 1 you take control of Lazy and complete 7 stages comprising of multiple levels that take place on planet Palua. The players throw energy projectiles at enemies to inflate them with air, which reminds me a lot of Dig Dug, and from there the player can take the inflated enemies to perform a variety of actions, such as launching them against other enemies in any direction, as well as float above the ground by repeatedly tapping the jump button. Defeated enemies may spawn power-ups and items, and players can take a number of enemy hits at the expense of losing power as a penalty, but the game is over after taking one last hit unless the players decide to continue playing. Personally, I thought that this game was a decent title. I am very curious why it didn't release back in the day after they developed it, but even still, I think it makes a great addition to the Neo Geo's library and doesn't really stick out as being a more modern title because of its lengthy development period. Overall, I'd give it a 7 or 8 out of 10.
Hurry, hurry. It.
Crossed Swords is a hack-and-slash action RPG arcade game that was developed by Alpha Denshi and published by SNK for the Neo Geo arcade system in July 1991. In terms of gameplay, I actually found it to be similar to a couple of games, the first being The Super Spy, which I already covered as a launch title for the Neo Geo. But instead of shooting and fist fighting, you're using hack-and-slash and RPG elements such as magic. And maybe that's perhaps why I enjoyed this title a bit better. The core gameplay of this title really comes down to correct timing in battle. Knowing that the basic rule of the game is to defend first before striking will help you get through this game. Which sadly that was a bit of a learning curve for me because I was more of an offensive player first. The player wields both a weapon and a shield and can move side to side, but the playfield will move automatically. Multiple paths are available through the game, and the player has the option to skip the first and second chapters entirely at the stage select screen at the beginning. When this game released, it did receive a more mixed reception of critics, but overall it was positive. However, as I really did enjoy this game despite its flaws, I felt that it was deserving more of an 8 or 9 out of 10 than the review scores that I've seen, which average around 7 or 6.5 out of 10. I will note I may be a bit biased because I did appreciate the game's graphics showing the player as a wireframe animation, kind of like they do in the game Punch-Out in the arcades, kind of giving you a mix of the best of a first-person and third-person view. I would recommend giving this game a playthrough, and I know at some point in time I would love to play its sequel that was only released on the Neo Geo CD. Magical Drop 2 is the second in a series of video games that was developed by Data East, and that series originally debuted on their proprietary arcade hardware, but starting with this title moved over to SNK's Neo Geo. In this game, a stack of random colored bubbles descend from the top of the play screen, and if it reaches the bottom, the player loses the game. To stop this from happening, the player plays as a clown at the bottom of the screen that can grab bubbles from the descending chaos, and can hold an unlimited amount of the same colored bubble. Launching them back towards the top of the screen can cause the bubbles to burst if it creates a chain of 3 or more vertically. When that happens, any other colored bubbles that touch that chain will also disappear, and the stack will move back towards the top of the screen. A chain reaction can happen when that causes other bubbles of the same color to come in contact with each other and create another chain. As opposed to the original, a change in this game is that special bubbles that descend down can now be matched together as well. Solo mode takes up the entire screen, where if you play as 2-player, it will have the screen cut in half. That is to accommodate the second player's screen. And there's a few other differences, but you kind of get the gist of it. Overall, I found this game fun in both single and 2-player mode. And that's something I can't say for a lot of other puzzle games, but as long as the core gameplay is solid and addictive enough, I feel that I can get myself behind this. This game also spawned another sequel on the Neo Geo, Magical Drop 3, and although there are some differences with this title, I didn't really find myself enjoying one over the other. So while having both may be a bit redundant, I could say either or will give you hours of enjoyment if you enjoy puzzle games where you get to have a simple concept that goes over and over again. Pop and Bounce is a puzzle game that was released in 1997 by Video System for the Neo Geo. This game looks and plays a bit like Arkanoid, where the player controls a paddle at the bottom of the screen and must bounce off a ricocheting ball in order for it to fall to the bottom. Instead of destroying bricks, though, the playfield is filled with various enemies for the player to defeat. However, in my opinion, this one is just not as fun, as I don't enjoy controlling that paddle with the joystick. I would much prefer something like a trackball, or even like the Atari 2600 paddle controllers in order to control this game. Sadly, that was game-breaking for me, leading me to not recommend this title unless, of course, you're rich and going for an entire Neo Geo collection. Puzzle Bobble, also known as Bust-A-Move, was released in 1994 as a tile-matching puzzle video game that was developed and published by Taito. The game's characters are based on the 1986 arcade game Bubble Bobble, and features a lot of characters and themes from that game. This game was originally developed for Taito's B system released in Japan, however, they used the Neo Geo MVS to release it internationally. At the start of each game, the rectangular playing arena contains a prearranged pattern of colored bubbles. At the bottom of the screen, the player controls a device called a pointer, which aims and fires bubbles up onto the rest of the screen. The goal is to match up the colors of the bubbles until you can form a chain reaction to make the bubbles explode. At that point, any other bubble that is relying on it to stay attached to the grid will also fall off the screen, leading to a lot of strategy that goes into this simple puzzle game. The objective of the game is to clear all of the bubbles from the arena without any bubble crossing the bottom line. As this game was not developed by SNK, it was available on other platforms and thus does not require you to collect it for the Neo Geo. Sadly, this was not released on the AES or the Neo Geo CD, so you'll have to spring for the MVS version and get a converter for your AES. I might recommend that though, because this game was incredibly addicting and I had a lot of fun playing it, as well as its sequel, Bust-A-Move Again or Puzzle Bobble 2, which does add some variations to the gameplay, characters, and themes, and would also be recommended, but again, you wouldn't have to own both, as I feel that would be a bit redundant. Neo Bomberman is an action maze arcade video game that was developed by Produce and published by Hudson Soft for the Neo Geo MVS on May 1st, 1997. Again, the Bomberman franchise got its start on other systems and not the Neo Geo. So this is again only released on the MVS. In terms of gameplay, this really isn't any different from any of the other Bomberman games, and since this video is more geared towards Neo Geo games, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail except for, yes, this is Bomberman, and it plays very well on the Neo Geo, and I had a lot of fun with it. But again, because it's on other platforms and didn't get its start here, I would recommend staying away from this one, again, unless you have millions of dollars and can afford a complete Neo Geo collection. Mr. Do initially hit arcades in 1982 and was developed by Universal. It was the first video game to be released as a conversion kit for other arcade machines. Taito published the arcade conversion kit in Japan, and the game itself is actually inspired by Namco's Dig Dug. This version, Neo Mr. Do, was produced by Visco Games in 1996, and really it just seems to be a graphical upgrade over the original. The game also includes, as you would imagine, a much more advanced soundtrack, but the core gameplay remains unchanged. And while I feel like this is a well-done title, again, I don't think it's an essential for a Neo Geo collection, unless you're either a fan of Mr. Do, or a fan of the Neo Geo, or again, one of those millionaire benefactors that are going to donate to my complete MVS collection. Last, we're going to take a look at a unique example that actually is not playable on the Neo Geo AES, at least not without some major modifications. The Irritating Maze, which is a game that lives up to its name, was released by Saurus in 1997 for the Neo Geo MVS. Unlike most games that utilize the MVS hardware, this game runs in a unique dedicated cabinet with special controls, including a trackball for movement. Basically, you have to guide this little symbol through each of the mazes without touching any of the obstacles or you die. I guess you can kind of consider the gameplay in a similar style to that of Flappy Bird, where the game can get potentially addictive if you just want to try to keep besting your friends, seeing who can get the farthest. Sadly, or thankfully I guess, depending on your perspective, this game is not playable on the Neo Geo AES as there is no official trackball controller available for it. I have seen a few forums online that show how to hook up a trackball controller to an MVS board to get this game to work, but I have not seen anyone who has developed a controller specifically for the AES so you can play this game on it. If you are aware of a trackball controller that works on this system, let me know and I will definitely give this game a shot. There were some quiz and board games that were only released in Japan, and unfortunately I can't play them because I don't read Japanese. The United States is no stranger to quiz video games that popped up in the 1980s, but I think by the 90s most of those had gone by the wayside. On the Neo Geo platform, there are a few quiz games that are available, but again, they were all only released in Japan. The first example I'm going to show of this is Quiz King of Fighters. This is the only quiz game that was released on the Neo Geo MVS, AES, as well as the Neo Geo CD. The game has a simple story where Yuri is screened before she is kidnapped, and you have to find out who is Yuri's kidnapper and what is Quiz City. Unlike the traditional fighting formula of King of Fighters, this game actually requires you to answer questions to defeat opponents. Questions can range from entertainment, sports, politics, geography, and other SNK trivia about their characters. The game itself plays similar to a board game, where each player starts by taking turns rolling a die, and then they move across the board. Again, the main problem I have with this game is the language barrier. But I have a trick that may help me play this game. In the past, I've usually set up an iPad in front of my television screen with the Google Translate app in front of it because it has the ability to live translate as you're playing. However, as you can see in my example footage here, it didn't exactly work out as I planned. I think the biggest problem here is the fast-paced gameplay. You really only have about 5 seconds to read each question, all of the answers, and answer. And that was really too fast for my iPad to keep up. The other part of this is the fact that the characters are not clearly defined. The more contrast that you have between your text and the background of the text, the better this app works, and unfortunately, they just don't have that high amount of contrast. I also played with the region settings in my Neo SD, and I was not able to find an English translation available natively in the game. Again, if you know of a ROM patch that includes an English translation, please let me know in the comments below, and I will definitely check it out and play this game further. Strangely enough, just by random guessing, I was able to win at least one battle, and I think if I kept going, maybe I could have had more success with this game, but there's really no fun in that. And there you have it. That is the majority of the platform, puzzle, RPG, and other miscellaneous games for the Neo Geo. I have to say I probably enjoy the platform games over the puzzle games just because I feel like they provide a bit more of an experience than the puzzle games would, but overall I do feel that all of these games on the platform are just too pricey for what you're gonna get out of these games. Thankfully, a lot of these were released on other platforms, so you don't have to go back and get them on the Neo Geo. And if I had to recommend just one game to get out of the slot, it would probably be Crossed Swords. Follow that up with any of the action platform games that I mentioned, and I would save most of the puzzle and maze games just for those that are hardcore dedicated to collecting for this system. That said, that is going to wrap things up for this video. Before you go, be sure to leave a comment below about what games you played for the system that were featured in today's video, which ones you liked, or which ones look interesting to you. Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video, and stay tuned for the next part coming out where I'm going to review the sports and racing games. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A special thanks to those Patreons you see on screen. Also, if you like what you see, please remember to leave a like and click that subscribe button on your way out. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.